Hey everyone, how's it going? And yeah, this is gonna be a mini review. Well, sort of a mini, since this book is actually an anthology story and I'm condensing a lot going on. As for what this is an anthology of, well, as you can see from the title, X-Men. In this case, XMenEvolution. Based on the 2000 TV series, XMenEvolution was made to essentially promote the X-Men movie that came out a few months earlier, but also to get some people interested in the Ultimate X-Men comics that were going to come out a few months after. And you can definitely tell here, especially since the premise is very similar to how the Ultimate X-Men kind of went down. The only big difference is, well, there's a lot when it came to down the line, but the biggest one being Wolverine here, even though he does start off as a mentor, is not a total creep. Seriously, what the hell is wrong with you? And also the fact they made him Cable is even weirder. I'm not even kidding, look it up. As for the premise of XMenEvolution, it's pretty simple. It's retelling the X-Men story where, in this continuity, Wolverine and Storm were actually the first people that Charles recruited, and they helped him start the Xavier Institute. Though, the Xavier Institute is less of a school and more like a boarding house for the first season, as the students are actually still going to high school up until they're revealed to be mutants. It was a really cool show, essentially building up to the X-Men that we all know and love, with season 1 with them trying to hide their mutations, Nightcrawler especially, since they actually had to give him a special hologram watch to hide his mutation, and Rogue having to come off as the loner goth girl so no one would be interested in talking to her. Oh boy, this did not really age well. And of course, as the X-Men are just starting, so are the villains. Starting with the Brotherhood of Mutants, who actually start off as kind of a frat house. It's kind of fun, with the roster being Toad, Quicksilver, back when he was a mutant, and maybe he is again, I don't know, the continuity is still freaking nuts there. Blob, probably the most popular version of Avalanche, and Mystique as their handler, though she also answers to Magneto, who in the first season is mostly a villain in the shadows kind of deal. Just like the X-Men, they start becoming more and more recognizably like the Brotherhood, along with a growing roster as well. We also had the villain of Mesmero, who was creeping around during season 2. And of course we had Senator Kelly, who at this time started off as Principal Kelly, slowly realizing mutants and fearing what they could be. And of course leading to stuff like the Sentinel program. The show lasted for 4 seasons, and it was a really good one, though it's also very 2000s. Like, there are a lot of like 2000s references and moments where you can tell that they're trying to be hip and cool with the kids. But as the series progressed, we did see less of that, and they just focused on trying to be an X-Men series. It might not have been as popular as the 90s series, but it has grown a following through the years, and I definitely believe it's worth a watch. But how about its comic tie-in? Well, let's get into that. Warning, spoilers. You know, this was a 9-part miniseries that was mostly an anthology, but the first 3 issues do dive into the origins of this universe's X-Men, starting with Charles and Magneto having their falling out, Charles and Storm actually recruiting Wolverine, Magneto trying to tempt him in, but Wolverine refuses, leading to Charles having his first 2 teachers, and then later on recruiting Scott and Jean, but the latter actually having it worse since the power to read minds has actually started to develop, and yeah, it's very overwhelming for her. But with the help of the Professor, Storm, and Scott, she is able to get it under control enough to face off against their first challenge, Toad, which is weird because in the first episode of the series, Toad was the first guy that they fought, and it was treated like this was the first time they met. And though they're able to brush off some of the stuff, like the kids getting their memories wiped and Toad not getting a good look at everybody, how did Scott and Jean forget that he was a mutant? This feels really off. Anyway, the first story is still pretty solid. After that, we follow to the one-shot, where we fast forward into the main series with the rest of the students from season 1 showing up, and Nightcrawler is having a bit of an identity crisis. As I mentioned, Nightcrawler actually had a device that would help camouflage himself to look like everyone else. For the most part, the show didn't really dive into it being a problem for him, but in here, we see Kirk actually questioning himself and actually having nightmares of his old life back in Germany and the fear of possibly being burned at the stake. But with the help of his friends like Kitty Pryde, he's able to figure some stuff out. Maybe a bit too easy, but anyway, moving on. Issue 5 is really weird because, yeah, again, this takes place around season 2, and Mystique is trying to get Rogue to join the Brotherhood, and for some reason, Rogue is acting like she's never met the Brotherhood, but no, it's been very clear that she's met them before. I don't even think they really explain how or why, but yeah, Mystique's whole plan was to make Rogue join the Brotherhood and make her believe that the X-Men were losing their mind. It's a really weird one. Issue 6 is actually probably my favorite, as though it does open with characters trying to be extreme, we're introduced to the character of Mimic. For those who don't know, in the OG comics, Mimic was actually human, but gained the powers to mimic mutant abilities. He jumped around from being enemy and foe to the X-Men, and in the main Marvel universe is kind of a minor character, but gained massive popularity with his mutant counterpart from the Exiles comics. And here, he starts off as both a friend and rival to Spike, a show original character who was Storm's nephew, and also went through one hell of a journey, but that's a whole other story. But things change as Mimic's powers develop, and though the X-Men do want to help him, well, both him and his mom are not interested. It's a really good story, and though it does have a bittersweet ending, it does leave open that maybe things can get better for him. Issue 7 is a pretty simple story that has all the students that were introduced in season 2 having a fun little baseball game. It's a really simple story and tons of fun. Really not much to say about that one. Then we have issue 8, which, yeah, that one's actually a pretty damn good one too. It's where the X-Men have to team up with Angel, who is dealing with the Morlocks. The Morlocks are a group of mutants who are living underground due to their mutations being far more severe and leading to physical mutations that do play a massive role later in the series, particularly with the character Spike, but again, that's a whole other story. In here, they actually kidnap and brainwash Angel, which leads to some pretty intense fights and even a really awesome moment with Angel in the end. The final issue is, yeah, it's just the X-Men throwing a house party while all the adults are out, and yeah, they already did this in the actual show, and it was honestly way better there. It's not terrible, there's some fun little jokes there, but yeah, not much to say about that one, and it was the ending, so yeah, lackluster way to end this miniseries. That was the XMenEvolution tie-in comic. On the most part, it was pretty fun. I do have to keep in mind that this was made for a younger audience. I could definitely see a kid really enjoying this series. Now, 8 of the issues were written by Devin Grayson and Jay Faerber on issue 9. Not much I can say about Faerber with issue 9 since, as I said, it's a pretty standard house party story. But with Grayson, again, the stories are tons of fun to read, and she clearly got the characters down, but when it comes to continuity, yeah, I kind of feel like she just skimmed some of the episodes and didn't really pay attention. But a lot of the characters are pretty down to how they were in the show, and speaking of, the characters are tons of fun here. Now, of course, this is going to be a shorter review, so I'm not going to go through every individual character, but they were handled very well. I do feel like Devin did focus more on what she knew about the comic characters more than the show characters, but luckily, they're not too different. The only real issue I had was with the Rogue issue because, again, it feels weird that she's acting like Rogue's never met the Brotherhood before. As for the villains, a lot of the villains were also pretty on point. Toad especially was a very weirdly tragic character, more so since he was in the show, and the Morlocks were really well done. Now, the art was done by multiple artists who work under Udon Studios, which isn't a really big surprise. Udon did a lot of stuff for Marvel, especially that really kick-ass Taskmaster design, but others might recognize them for their time on Street Fighter. I wouldn't because I'm not a big Street Fighter guy. Yeah, I'm sorry everybody. But yeah, for the most part, the art's pretty good. It does stick to the style of the show for the most part. The only time it really went off was really issue 9, because yeah, I have no idea why they went that cartoony, but yeah, that's just a nitpick really. The art besides that was pretty on point. So yeah, on a whole, I definitely recommend XMenEvolution's comic tie-in. It's tons of fun, and if you're a fan of the show, I recommend checking it out. And I do recommend checking out the show too if you're looking for more X-Men material. So yeah, give it a look. Thanks for watching. Like, share, subscribe, and of course next time, well, Wolverine was in the story and he's a very bestial character, so we're going to be following that theme. But, of course, it's October, so diving into my favorite monster. Later.